What's going on, U.S. history students? We're starting our second unit. Fun times. Immigration, industrialization, and imperialism. Three I's, I like to call this unit. Pretty much what we're going to cover is everything kind of post-Civil War, kind of how America develops at the end of those 1800s. And the focus of that is on three kind of central themes, which are immigration, industrialization, and imperialism. We're going to get a little bit into each bit, but for the beginning here, we're going to focus on industrialization, kind of what that looks like, what that means, how it plays out in American history, and that's where we're going to kind of go today. All right, so let's get into it. So let's talk about the Industrial Revolution. So this Industrial Revolution, in the time period that you're most commonly going to probably hear about when we talk about Industrial Revolution in any world history class, is kind of the early 1800s, starting all the way and going to the early 1900s. It's a time period of a lot of innovations, technological changes. People now could buy goods from other people instead of having to provide everything for themselves. It helped grow the U.S. economy and the U.S. population significantly, and the birth of factory work, and it was the birth of factory work and mass production of goods. Essentially, when we talk like the word industry, that's all that means is just production and producing. And before this time period, most people relied off working on either being a farmer or some type of craftsman, where they would do some craft work. They'd be a blacksmith, or they would be a leather worker, or things of that nature, right? They maybe would sew and produce textiles, but for the most part, it wasn't mass production, and it wasn't enough to where people could consistently produce, regardless of the conditions, and consistently make money. And so with that, economies throughout the world were pretty much based off of, very much kind of just bartering and trading for a very long time. And economies were pretty simple. They weren't really going to really grow that fast. And there was a lot of reasons for that, but primarily because if there's not a lot of goods being sold, because there's not a lot of goods produced, there's just not going to be enough money being injected into an economy, right? And if there's not enough money in an economy, right, and there's not enough stimulation, there's not going to be enough jobs, there's not going to be enough people getting paid a lot. And so it's just going to be a very, kind of stunted economy. But when all of a sudden, a lot of these innovations and inventions took hold and were created in the 1800s, it rapidly and dramatically changed not only the United States, but the global economy. As a result, there's a lot of changes that happen in our country because of this time period. And innovation is the key of leading the way. So a lot of people, like I was kind of talking about, they used to be farmers, or they used to kind of just be craftsmen. But now, because there was these new innovations, these new technologies, these new inventions, and we're going to get into them in a second, there was a rapid desire to build factories. Factories typically were built in the cities. So what we saw is, not just in the United States, but around the world, is people shifted from living on the farmland to moving into the cities. That's why today, most population centers are found in the cities, right? More people live in San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose than live in like Merced or Tracy or Stockton, right? Or maybe in the middle of other places that you might have been to, because there's more jobs that are in the city. And so as a result, populations grow out from that, right? So there you go. Here's some of the inventions, and you're going to do more of this work in your the homework assignment that goes with this video. But some of the big inventions, electricity is probably the most important invention, because it provided the automation of a lot of different for machines. It provided pretty much a lot of things just can't work without electricity. Like I can't even record this meeting, right, without electricity. Things aren't charged. If there's not light, you can't work in the dark or at night, which kind of leads us to the next invention, the light bulb, right? So the light bulb produces light. That should be pretty common sense. The telephone. Hello? I got a couple phones, you know how it is. But the telephone, right? This is very important to our lives today. Changed communication back then. People could communicate across the country, across states, and talk, kind of like how we talk on the phone in real time. Powered flight, right? People could start traveling further and faster. Iron ships, again, improvements in travel. Railroads, improvements in travel, right? The production of steel, this is really important. Steel used to be really heavy and cost a lot of money in the way it was produced. That changed in the 1800s. We started figuring out ways to produce steel for cheaper and that it could be a little bit more lighter and more malleable and that we could bend it and shape it. So that's how we're able to build these gigantic skyscrapers, right? That like you kind of look at and you're like, how does that not fall over? It's because, our ability to produce steel. And so that helped build factories, build a lot of things in the city, which is pretty big. And of course, the car, I used to always say, like my minivan, I don't have my minivan anymore, RIP. But cars also, again, changed the way we live, the way we travel, the way we're able to commute in and out of the cities. So it's big. A lot of these innovations happened in the Industrial Revolution. Okay. So now we got to talk about two types of groups of people that come up. You have the owners of production and you have the workers, okay? So the owners of production, okay, are the people who are in control of the factories. They were the big bosses, right? They controlled every aspect of a worker's day. When they started, when they were allowed to take breaks, when they got off, when they were allowed to use the bathroom, when they could eat, how much they got paid, things like that, what type of jobs they were going to do that day. And oftentimes these owners of production came from money or they invented something that made them rich. But a lot of times they came from some type of wealth or background. So you have those type of people or the people that kind of made their own life and made their own success. They provided the money and the resources for the factories to be built, and they made the most of the profit off of what the factories produce. And we're going to talk about in the next lesson some of the individuals who struck it really rich. And you maybe know some of them. The workers, they make up the majority because only a small minority made up the owners of production. 99+% of people were workers now. The worker was an individual who worked at the factory. They were now paid a wage to make whatever the factory was producing. Before, people got paid because, let's say I was a blacksmith and I got paid $1 for every sword I made. So my wages, my pay, what I owned, right? The things, my ability to pay for things was directly correlated with my ability to produce a sword. So if I didn't produce a sword, I wasn't getting paid, right? Or if I didn't produce enough swords, I wasn't getting paid. This changed dramatically because of the Industrial Revolution, because now people were getting paid not for what they produced, but for the hours of their life that they gave up to work. So every job, even to this day, people get paid hourly, right? You get paid, you're getting paid a certain amount of money, and if you divide the amount of time up that you or if you divide that number by the amount of hours you give up, that's what your 1 hour of time is worth, right? Some people, right, like Patrick Mahomes, that guy makes like $100,000+ an hour or something like that. It's tens of thousands of dollars. It's an insane number of what he's making per hour, per minute, per second. Someone like me, I'm only making, a cool billy here and there. But no, I'm not making what millionaires and billionaires make. Or someone who works a minimum wage job, their hour of their time isn't as valued as much as mine. So this is a big thing I want you to understand. Before the Industrial Revolution, people were paid directly um, by what they produced. Now people were paid by their hour of the time they gave up of their life. What is that valued, right? The federal minimum, I think, in the state of California, the minimum wage is $15. That's what, at the very minimum, an hour of your time is worth, is $15. Kind of crazy to think about it in that way. But getting back to the workers, these people were usually from poor backgrounds, didn't really have a lot of education, resources, or means to kind of improve their situation in life, but they chose to work in factories for a consistent paycheck and job. Remember, farming, craftsmanship can be unpredictable. It's very dependent on the weather, especially for farming. Because most factories were very simple, workers could be replaced by basically any other person, and it would not affect production. For example, if your job was to, what's something easy I can do? If your job was to draw a line on a piece of paper, right? So I have my piece of paper, right? I could just go draw my line, next, draw my line, next. Anyone can do that. For the world history kids who had me last year, we recreated kind of what a factory job would be, and when you made a little stick figure, right? You probably remember that, okay? So it's kind of, unfortunately, we can't do that now, but for the world history kids, you can remember that lesson. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This kind of just shows you the amount of people that went into manufacturing. There we go, I can put myself there. And this shows you the radical increase in workers over time in just a period of 50 years. In 1850, there's only 1 million. All of a sudden you go 1870, there's 2 million. All of a sudden by 1900, there's 5 million. That's a 500% increase in 50 years. It's kind of wild. 50 years ago was 1970. So it seems like a long time, but it's really not that long. Okay, let's go to the next one. This goes to show you kind of what these jobs were like. Again, you were lined up, you had a station, you had a job, you had a responsibility, and you were surrounded by like 100 other people that were doing similar like things to you. Also kind of note, you'll see kind of women and children were finally allowed to start working now in this time period. Before, it was mostly men who were responsible for working. But now, because there were so many jobs available, because so many factories were being built and so many things were being produced because of all these innovations, there were a lot of jobs. So, kids were allowed to come into work and women were allowed to come into work. And the kind of crazy thing is, if you look at the picture of the kids, these kids were shoeless, in a factory, no protective gear. We're going to talk about some of the things that happened to kids and people during this time period because there wasn't a lot of protection for workers. Kind of crazy stuff. And of course, this is just like an example of what a big old factory would look like. They're typically by bodies of water, so that way they could ship off the goods on through rivers or lakes or across oceans even. Again, this showing you a factory, right? He looks like maybe a younger man, a teenage boy, and then some of the younger, like preteen kids, and maybe 9, 10 years old. There were jobs to be had. And so we'll talk more about kind of the conditions of working in our next lesson. Or actually, no, I guess we're talking about this one. I've got that all mixed up. Whoops. Well, we can't talk about it now then. So let's talk about industrial era working conditions. The conditions were pretty much horrible, okay? Factories were dark, dirty, dangerous. It was not safe. People got their fingers chopped off. More people died in the Industrial Revolution per capita than at any other time in American history in terms of deaths while working. It was insane, right? There wasn't a lot of safety. There wasn't any consideration for the workers, and the workers couldn't do anything. Because if you complain, oh, hey, I'm kind of scared about doing this, or I'm uncomfortable doing this, you got fired. There weren't unions yet. There weren't these things to protect workers. There was no paid time off, vacation, mandated breaks, wearing a hard hat, wearing gloves, shoes, glasses, right? That wasn't a thing yet. You just went and you did your job, and if you didn't like it, you got fired. And that's how it was. So employees worked hard and long hours, but were paid very little. And so as we have this rapid shift and as we have this rapid increase into economies, these are in the economy, there were some new ideas that came about how we should manage the rapidly growing economy. Two main theories and ideas have stuck with us to this day. And the first one is capitalism. The second one is socialism. They exist on a scale, and I'm going to explain that in a second. So this is an image, that explains the difference between capitalism and socialism. So capitalism, and we'll just kind of roll through this. Capitalism is where the ownership, right, of who owns the product, who owns the resources, it's owned by private firms, okay? Whereas in socialism, they are owned more so by the government, okay? In capitalism, equality is determined, income is determined based off market forces. So a doctor is very valued. So a doctor gets paid more money than a teacher, or a lawyer is more valued in our society. So a lawyer gets paid more money, right? At the same time, as a teacher, I am considered more valuable than, say, a janitor, right? I make more money than someone who's a janitor. In a socialist system, all that money is shared relatively equally and spread out. Prices are determined by supply and demand. The reason the iPhone costs $1,000 is because it's in such high demand, right? Whereas in a socialist society, there'd be a price control. There'd be, it's going to cost this much for a phone, $100 per person, okay? Efficiency. In capitalism, it's all about being efficient. What can I get away with as the owner of production? Do I have to do these? Like, do I have to provide these type of safety accommodations for my workers? Do I have to provide them breaks? What's the most efficient way to cut cost, right? In socialism, those incentives don't exist, right? Because everyone's getting paid the same regardless of what you produce. So there's less of incentive to be efficient. Taxes, this is a big one. In true capitalist system, limited taxes and limited government spending. The government stays out of business. Whereas in a socialist society, big taxes, much more spending goes down on public services. So think of like more spending for schools, more spending on healthcare, which we're getting into next. Capitalism. In America, for example, since we're a pretty capitalist society, it's kind of every person for themselves. Hopefully you have insurance, right? Obamacare was a thing that kind of helped to get more people through insurance. There's Medi-Cal, Medicaid. If you go to a socialist country, healthcare is provided by the government for free. It just comes out of taxes. That's why they have more taxes in a socialist society. I'm gonna move my camera up. Problems. In capitalism, you're going to have issues like corruption, monopoly, which we're going to talk about. You're going to have limited workers' rights. There's going to be a ton of inequality because, right, we have billionaires and then we have people who are poor or are homeless or making no money. We have vast wealth inequality depending on where you are in life in terms of your status and social economic status. Socialism, better equality, which we're going to get to in advantages, but their big thing is they're not as efficient. There's less incentives to be creative about pushing new products and coming up with new ideas. There's less of an incentive, right? If I own a phone company, right, and the price is already set, right, there's no point, my workers are getting paid a certain amount, everyone's going to be treated the same. Why am I going to work hard to make a better phone? Why am I going to work hard to challenge myself or my workers to create something that is a better product than say, like, let's say this is the Tomei phone, right? Why work harder to beat Verizon or AT&T? It's all the same. So there's less incentives for in a social society when it comes to the economy. The advantages now in a capitalist society, it's very dynamic. Things can change fast. There's a lot of incentives for growth. There's a lot of incentives, go out, create a business, be the next Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, whatever. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of competition and sometimes it brings the best out of people. And then in socialism, their advantages are everyone's equal. It's, equality over everything. And so when you have that, there's gonna, you might not have as much of a dynamic market. You might not be home to the next Apple, next Google or whatever, but you're going to have, people kind of living in a more equal state. To give you an idea of how this exists in the real world, I'm going to show you my whiteboard. Let's make sure you can see this. Okay, cool. Now let me grab one that works here. Let's see, does this work? Nice, it does. Okay, so I'm going to draw a scale. That scale fit? I know you guys might not be able to see. That's a little better. Okay. So on this scale, we're going to have the left side over here, which I guess is your right side in the way you're viewing this, will be capitalism. Okay. On the other side, we'll have socialism. Okay. Now, depending on where you go in this world, you're going to see countries and places be either a little bit more capitalist or a little bit more socialist. Here in the United States, we value capitalism. So we'd be here. America. Okay. So USA is on more the capitalist side. Now, you go over here, kind of more like Europe, a lot of countries in Europe, they're going to be more on the socialist side. Okay. So you have countries like Europe over on this side of the scale. Big differences between how life would be in the United States versus Europe. The United States, we have, more billionaires than any other country. We have more millionaires than any other country. We have gigantic homes, gigantic fast cars. We have all these different products. We're the home to all these different companies like Google and Amazon that have changed the world. So we have all these things that are good, a ton of jobs. Typically when the economy is doing well, right, we have a low amount of unemployment in good times. So that's kind of our good things we have. The bad things, though, is like we do have issues, especially here in the Bay Area, with homelessness, the cost of living, economic inequality, right? I'm a teacher trying to be able to afford a home, be able to live here one day. I'm sure your parents or your guardians have those same issues of trying to provide. Maybe some of you have jobs. You're just trying to survive in this society. And that's, the economic inequality that exists in a capitalist system. Another big issue, we talk about healthcare. I pay $300 a month just to have Kaiser. And then when I go to the hospital, sometimes I still got to pay money, right? And sometimes if, hopefully this never happens, but if I had cancer or if I had a heart attack, some of that stuff, I'm going to have to pay for some of that. And it could cost a lot of money. You've probably seen the GoFundMe for when people get in accidents or things happen to them or they get sick. And the fact that people have to, pretty much do GoFundMes just to pay for their healthcare sometimes is insane. Now, if you go to Europe, here's where it's different. A lot of European countries, now you're talking about free healthcare. Now you're, shoot, oh, I broke my finger. I just go to the hospital. It's fixed, no charge, right? There is free college if you go over there. There are other programs to incentivize kind of just general well-being of the public and equality for all. And so that's really great about Europe. They do those things really well. But then there are less major companies over there. There are less billionaires and millionaires. There's less, the advancements in technology and business. That doesn't happen quite as much in Europe. So, depending on what you want to do with your life and how you want to live and where you want to go, maybe Europe might be a place that you want to check out and maybe move to one day, or maybe you really like the way USA is. You go to other places around the world. So for example, you got places not quite as capitalist, but like Japan and South Korea are going to be more on this side. Okay. And then, you go to places that are more even socialist than Europe. You got like China, Cuba, North Korea. Those places, the government owns everything. They're going to tax you a ton, and so your taxes are going to be really high. And there's generally kind of like a little bit less individual freedom that exists there. But the goal is that everyone is equal. That might not be true in some of these more radical countries with bad leaders, and even in Europe, but that's the goal of socialism. Then you got places that are kind of in the middle, okay? You got like most Latin American countries are like this. You're gonna see, variety mix of like Middle East and Africa are kind of more in the middle. So depending on where you go in the world, right, the point of all this is to demonstrate that capitalism and socialism exist on a scale. For example, okay, where's my finger? There it is. If we get free healthcare, right, all of a sudden we decide to go that route, okay, then the United States would become probably more socialist. So we would move on the scale. We'd move a little bit over, right? Or let's say this didn't happen. Let's say, all of a sudden, we got rid of like Medi-Cal or Medicaid or Obamacare. We'd move more this way, right? And so we'd move the scale that way. Again, the whole point of this is to demonstrate that this is a scale. And then depending on what we do in our country and how we want to manage it and how we want to handle it, we're going to move on the scale. Okay? So we're going to go over more of that. You probably should have learned a little bit about that in world history. But thank you for following along in this video. And that is all I have for you. So have a great day. Do your assignment. I'll see you in the next class.